This is not ideal, but again, this is this is. Hey guys, we've got something a little different today. We have a special guest on. If you're not familiar with Nick, runs his own YouTube channel. I'll let him give you his proper introduction, but just as a gist, he runs a show called Punt or No Punt. I had some fun with him a few weeks ago. We filmed some content. We had initially filmed our own of this. Unfortunately, the footage didn't work. So it's actually round 2, to be completely honest. So I have an idea of how spicy Nick can get now. So now we're on round 3. So hopefully these are even spicier than the first 3 he brought. But yeah, I'll let Nick give a little plug about himself as well.
I would say they're on a par, but there's one hand that at the end that is well up there. But yeah, I stream on Twitch. I'm part of the A-State Poker stream team under EC22, and also obviously have a YouTube channel. We have already got part 1 out, and I think by the time you see this, part 2 of Ryan's Punt or No Punt on my channel, and I'm sure Ryan will have those links in the description below if you're interested in those. He gets pretty badly destroyed, so I thoroughly recommend it if you're fans of that.
Yeah, head to Nick's channel to see like the spicy side of me. This is, we're usually a strategy section type videos on YouTube, but yeah. There's a little less strategy, a little more just craziness on Nick's channel. So definitely check out some of my video, and the other ones on there are great as well. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's start looking at some of these hands. The first one we got up, we start with a good hand. We've got ace jack off. What could go wrong here, right?
I mean, what could possibly go wrong? We're going to open it up to 2.4. That's my sizing.
All right, open up. Do we have any relevant information, or is we going into this hand blind?
I mean, I could bring the HUD up for you briefly. I'm not sure if they would see it, but they can see that this guy's quite tight. But not many hands played. Okay, sure. The villain is cut off. Yep. And it folds through, and we see a flop of 3 king deuce. Okay.
If as I mentioned, we talked a bit last when we tried to film this the first time. Basically, I'm assuming you're checking range here when you're out of position.
That's correct. Yep.
We're gonna check here. We don't know decision to be made then. Mm-hmm. Check. And our opponent starts with a half pot bet. All right, so in these spots, our opponent's range is supposed to be pretty strong. Again, we don't know anything about this opponent, but he's flagging the cutoff. It's going to happen a bit more deep, so maybe that's factoring into his decision. Mm-hmm. He's using a half pot size, which I think is okay. It's not a board he should bet a ton on. I don't think he necessarily needs to go big and small here. He could, just kind of pick this half pot size and go kind of mergy. So I don't mind his size. And we decide to continue in some fashion. We wouldn't be looking at this.
It's true.
So if I'm going to proceed with this hand, I usually check call because, I don't have much equity. Usually when I check raise, I want to at least be able to make some sort of nutted hand at some point. The benefit of obviously check raising this hand is you block some continues, but I think I would rather just, if I'm going to continue this versus opponent, I usually check call, but if you get spicy, let's see.
No, we're just going to go for the call. The spice is reserved for a little later in the hand.
Okay, later in the hand we get spicy. Okay, now I can see how things might get spicy. Okay,
yeah.
So we check call.
And then we check again, and he bets 2/3, 3/4 pot.
Okay. What are your thoughts here? I have a preference on turn, but I'm curious how you would approach this spot.
So I considered check raising. What I like about check raising is that it's kind of tough for me to navigate river when I call and I'm out of position here. I'm not going to win the pot very often. Like, it's hard to see how I would win the pot unless there's obviously a 10 and then some other runouts that I can maybe lead on. So I think check raising is probably, if I'm going to continue, better, but I don't think that's what I do here.
I actually don't mind check call here if you do.
Okay, that is what I do.
Once we get to this point, I think flop is honestly the closest spot. Once you get here, your hand, I don't see that much merit in check raising our hand because his range is pretty polar on turn. Mm-hmm. So we either have the best hand. He's not going to be betting like pocket 8s or pocket 7s or anything like that. So his betting range is going to be draws and bluffs, and we have the nut, no pair.
Sure.
So there's not a ton of reason to check raise this hand. Obviously, we can, with the ace of clubs blocker, sometimes bluff river, but I don't think there's a ton of reason to start bluffing now. So I think check call is pretty reasonable once we get here.
Yeah. I also would note about his sizing is in the back of my mind is that this guy's a tighter player and he probably doesn't understand overbets in the spot, which I would assume he'd probably, if he's going to bet here, he'd probably want to do a bunch of big bets rather than this sizing. Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that he's going to be using this size with weaker hands and an overbet size with a stronger hand. I just think he's just using this size with everything because he doesn't understand. That would probably be my guess, if that makes any difference. That's my thought process. Mm-hmm. I do call. River is interesting. I guess we have a decision point here. Mm-hmm. Before
I don't think so. Whenever I'm thinking about leading river, I think somehow my range is now. No, a little plug for this. I did a little module for Upswing recently on this, but basically, whenever you're thinking about leading, you want to think like, has my range now improved beyond my opponent's range? Is this card so much better for my check calls that now, this is in a perfect world. Obviously, there's gonna be some exploitive stuff that happens, but if you think your opponent's playing reasonable, you're playing reasonable, has this card improved my range so much that now my EV is higher than my opponent's EV? And I don't think this is going to happen on this river. Like, it's not like we get to the river with mainly flush draws or a ton of straights to complete. There's going to be spots where this is the case. It's usually going to be spots where you have a lot of like pair plus draw, and then on the river all of those draws complete that your opponent's lacking. But in this spot, your opponent's uncapped, you haven't improved in any way, so I don't mind bluffing this hand, but I wouldn't develop a leading strategy in this spot. So my bluffing strategy with a hand like this would be to check raise.
Okay. Well, it looks like we might be on the right lines here. I agree. I think the main reason I like checking is because I think that bluffing this, like, I don't know what sizing I could use to fold out a lot of the things that he wants to bet the turn with. Like, because you said, like, he'll either snap fold something like diamonds, which I beat anyway, or he'll probably just call, like, side call at like a set or a king or something like that quite often, unless I lead for like overbet, which is just a bit silly. So I think with the ace of clubs, my preference is just going to be to garner the most folds from his range that wants to bet the river, is going to be to check raise, and hopefully he can give up some diamonds as well, and I can win at showdown potentially, optimistically speaking. He doesn't give up though, bets pot.
This spot is interesting because he's now, if we're paying attention to sizing, his sizing has gotten bigger each street, right? It was half pot flop, and like a 2/3 size, and now it's full pot. These spots are weird because not that he can't have this size, not that he can't have bigger sizes, but humans typically have a hard time bluffing this spot without like the nut blocker. Like, he's using a huge size, and obviously he can't have the ace of clubs because we have the ace of clubs, right? So it's kind of a weird spot. Like, I also don't expect him to flat a ton of offsuit stuff. So it's one of those spots where it's very easy to basically under bluff this spot because you're never going to have optimal blockers here. Like, he's not going to get to the river. He's going to have a hand that is like ace 5 that bluffs the river, or, I don't even know, like some diamonds, which people hate bluffing diamonds, or some sort of just like random ace 10 of hearts that stab flop and is now just going nuts on the river. So just kind of interesting because he's going to be lacking bluffs, which means whenever that's the case, we have to be aware that, we talked about this in the footage that will never be released. So in the secret footage that you guys will never get to see, we talked about something like this where, although obviously when we try and bluff in these spots, part of our goal is to get him to fold like good hands, right? Like, obviously if we're bluffing, we're trying to get our opponent to fold some good hands. But obviously, like, when we're bluffing, it would also be amazing for us if he just has ace 10 or 10-7 of diamonds, whatever. Obviously we win versus those hands anyways, but it doesn't, like, that's still good for our EV when they're bluffing. This actually is better for us because if we could have bluffed them ourselves by betting the river, now at least when they have 10-7 of diamonds, we check and they bet, we get this extra 28 big blinds in the middle. So it's obviously good for us if he's ever bluffing. I'm just kind of reluctant to think this man is ever bluffing in this line. So now we're strictly trying to use our blocker and our depth to just like punish the fact that we're pretty sure he has either like a weak flush or some sort of set or straight. Because that's probably close to the bottom of his betting range in this line. Yeah. And so we're just thinking like, all right, we know you have one of these hands. And do we think if we put in another 130 big blinds, 125 big blinds, that you're going to fold that hand? And did you have any reason to suspect this guy might fold this stuff?
So I think it comes down to two things on the river. I was thinking about this. I was on the stream, and I think the first thing I'm thinking of, and I don't know whether this matters or not because the opponent I'm against might not be thinking this way, but hopefully he is that this is a single raise pot. So I have all of my ace X of clubs, every single one. So I know I have, and I know that I'm going to play them very similarly, because I know on the river I'm going to want to get the absolute lot. So I'm almost certainly going to check the river and shove with all my nut flushes. Does he know that I have all those? Is he going to be thinking like that? I'm not certain, but like it's not like it's a 3-bet pot where I'm going to fold a lot of those out of position. It's a single raise pot where I have all of them. So I have loads and loads of nut flushes. So I was like, okay, that's good for me. But does he know that? I'm not sure. And secondly, what you've already touched on, I'm almost certain he has a flush, because I don't even think this kind of player would bet a set for this sizing. I think they would just bet like 2/3 or even half pot, even when they're not supposed to. I think he just literally only has a flush. And if he was ever bluffing, he would need to have my card. So I think we can rule out any bluffs and any sets, personally, from my experience of this pool. So I am literally going to have to say to him, would you like to fold a flush, please, sir? And I don't know if that's a good idea, but I knew for a fact that I had a ton of combos of nut flushes here, tons. So I don't know, man. What do you think?
This spot's interesting too, because if he's a thinking player, it's very difficult for you to arrive at this river with bluffs, because for the same thing we just talked about, like when you check shove the river, you either have the nut flush or you have the ace of clubs, because it's like it'd be pretty like suicidal if you just check shove this river with like, I don't know, ace queen no club, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Ace queen ace of diamonds. It'd be just like crazy to do that.
Yeah.
But also, as I talked about, like this hand's pretty marginal on flop to begin with. Like this is maybe like the weakest hand that check calls flop. And so this is the only, and you don't have ace 3 off, you don't have ace 2 off. So you can never have like ace X with a pair and a club that gets the river. So this is literally the only ace of clubs hand that you're basically going to get to the river with that can now bluff. Maybe you could have ace 10 with ace clubs as well, but like, you know, we're getting like into very few combos compared to obviously you have every ace X of clubs that you can get to the river. So I think if you were any shallower than this, let's just might as well. We know it's coming, right?
Yeah.
If it was any shallower, I'd say this is definitely a punt, because
agree,
you don't have it doesn't matter. Like based on how face up you think his range is, then this just becomes like a torch, right? Like if we could see our opponent's cards and we saw he had like 10-9 of clubs and we had 100 big blinds, it'd be like, well, he's never folding that.
Sure.
He's not really supposed to fold many flushes in this line regardless. So I think I'm going to say no punt due to stacked depth and blockers, but it's very close.
It is so close. Because you're absolutely right. Everything you say is right, is what I was thinking. Like, he just has a flush. Will he ever fold a flush? Do I have enough big blinds? Like, the more big blinds I have, the better it is. Because the less likely he is to be able to call. I thought I had just enough.
If you had 50 more big blinds, I'd really like this.
Yeah.
I think so. Like, I think it's passable here. If you had any less, definite punt.
Yeah.
If you had any more, I'd say definitely no punt. So we're right on that line.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say no punt for this one.
Wonderful. Would you like to see if it gets through or not?
I'm going to guess no.
We get the full time bank, which is always nice because, you know, that means at least he's thinking about what I might have. Get the absolute full time bank, but unfortunately we get called by a flush. Pretty spicy from him on the flop and stuff, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I would prefer him to overbet if he wants to bet the turn, but I don't know. He's obviously not the strongest player, but he's got all my money, so.
Well, and also your flop call seems a lot more reasonable if you have stuff like this arranged.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Oh well, that's gone.
Let's see if we can try winning a pot the next one, maybe.
Let's have a look.
We're moving on to the next one. Pretty funny because one of the hands that was featured in Nick's version of the series, I had pocket sevens and I got pretty out of line with pocket sevens. So I believe I had the 7 of clubs in that hand too. So let's see if Nick does the same thing.
Funnily enough, this came after we recorded that, so I like to think that you were my inspiration for this. And I blame you entirely for what you're about to see. Right, so it folds to me on the button.
All right.
Do you have any thoughts here?
I think I don't always think flatting is I don't always have a ton of flats in these spots, but I think this is a spot where even lower stakes with higher rake, I think this spot's pretty good. You're against 2 players. Our hand's not really amazing to squeeze, but definitely too strong to fold. And then the other added benefit is we have 2, I'm assuming, weaker players in the blinds. So, they're going to just come along and our hand's going to play pretty well, 4 or 5 ways. We're basically trying to hit a set the more people that come in the pot, and we get to play in position. So those all sound like good things.
Yeah, they do, don't they? So naturally, I do call. I thought I was actually going to raise there. But no, we do call. I like that a lot. And definitely because of the blinds, for sure. Calling. 5-4-3.
All right. I can see how things might get spicy with this hand already.
I'm not sure they're going to get spicy in the way that you think. Checks to me.
All right. You actually can get away. So this board is really good. Obviously, we have sevens. Like, we're going to have the most sets. Like, under the gun's not supposed to open 4s and 3s full frequency. Who knows if they are. They're not supposed to have like 5-4 suited, 7-6 suited full frequency, whereas we can definitely VPIP a lot of those in this spot. So it's not to say we don't have a bunch of air as well, but we have a lot of very strong hands in this spot. And same thing with MP. They're not really supposed to flat those type of hands. So you can get away with actually like a lot of very small betting if you want. This is one of those spots where you could put different sizes into a solver and play either, but you could go very small and go a bit more high frequency and just like protect that with a lot of strong hands, or be a bit more polar and try and leverage that, that betting range you want to have that does benefit from betting bigger.
Sure. I like the first option generally is my strategy. And it goes call fold.
All right.
9 of diamonds. Check.
So we talked about, I think this concept a little bit in the video I did with you as well, as we don't typically get to bet multiple streets, especially the bigger the pot is and the tighter the ranges are, for protection. So if we're betting here, especially once he's already check called flop, we have to think that our hand is ahead of his flop check calling range, basically, right? So if you think this type of opponent, like the 9's a brick, he doesn't really have a 9 in his range. So if you think your opponent, his check call range is relatively capped, and that's mainly ace highs, some draws, that type of thing, then you can get away with another bet here. You also have the gut shot to back it up, so you have some equity to go with it when he does have, the pocket 8s, pocket 9s, pocket 10s type region. So honestly think both options are fine. It's a little thin to bet, but I think the only way it becomes really bad is if your opponent starts like check raising with both value and bluffs pretty aggressively on the turn, and I'm not sure how often that's going to happen.
I do go for another bet, small one.
Okay
with this.
Are you splitting here, or would this be your only size?
This is the time where I tell you I have absolutely no idea. It just was like, I think I can get value from ace high here, so I'm probably going to use this. If I had a different hand, I would probably use a bigger sizing. So I don't know. Like, I think I would probably do the same thing with. Yeah, no, I think I probably would use this with most things.
I think that's more important. So basically what I always say in these spots is the more you respect your opponent, the more it's important to balance both sizes, right?
Yeah.
If your opponent is like a super straightforward opponent that's never going to check raise bluff, then you could like cap yourself in this line. It wouldn't really matter. Then the more you like think, this opponent plays pretty reasonably, then you want to make sure that you're not like all my pocket 7s type hands go in this size. And then if I have like sets, really strong draws, straights, I'm going to, pot or overbet those hands, right? So as long as you're consistent, not leaving yourself up to getting exploited, then that's fine.
We get check raised.
Okay. So we're obviously not going to, first of all, what's your thoughts on this?
I have no idea what he's saying he has. Because check call the flop, and then the 9 of diamonds changes nothing, and then they use this really small check raise turn sizing. It almost feels like he knows exactly what I'm doing, and he doesn't feel like there's enough money in the pot with his overpair. So he's like, right, I'm pretty sure I'm getting like milked here by like 6-5, pocket 6s, pocket 7s, pocket 8s. I'm pretty sure that people are imbalanced in this spot. Like you said, it's important to be balanced in this spot, because otherwise you will get people doing this to you. So he probably thinks I don't have sets. I'm like, well, I do, buddy. And that's pretty much the thought process.
Okay, so what would you do if you had those hands now?
I would 3-bet.
Okay. Would you have many trap calls here?
No, I think I would probably not. I don't think that we're going to get tons of money on the river in this spot if I call. Rightly or wrongly, I like to be in a position where if I'm going to be value betting the river, if I'm going to be getting to the river, I want to be able to be in control and put the money in the pot. on myself. And I think if he bets the river and I shove, that line is just unreal strong. I also expect him to check the river a lot once I call. So I'm not, if I have a good hand here, like, because I know I'm going to have 6-7 suited pure, based on the pre-flop stuff and the 2 blinds, and I'm banking on him to know that. And I know that I'm going to have sets, bunch of sets. I may even have pocket 9s. So at least some of the time. So I'm thinking that he just is just full of shit, basically, and this is just exactly what it looks like. And he's reading my some supposed imbalance and also being imbalanced himself. So it's time to stick it on him.
All right, well, let's see what happens next time.
We're 3-betting the turn.
All right.
What do we think about this?
I think the problem with this spot is I think I'd rather delay this bluff to the river for the most part. Right. So we still have equity, and there's a lot of like, say he's trying to milk us with the hands you talked about. And there's gonna be so many bad rivers. So say he is kind of like, it'd actually be really bad for him to like delay check raise like pocket 10s here, right? Yeah. On this turn, it's not like pocket 10s is gonna want to play a bunch of big pots on the river, right? Once pocket 10 sees this turn at this SPR, check raising becomes like very bad, and like check raising small doesn't really help him, right? He's just gonna still inflate the pot, still gonna be a high SPR spot. So I think this might be a spot where if he's bluffing, we're doing very well. It's not like his bluffs have like that much equity, like especially the ones that are going to fold to this size. So I think I'd rather just take my hand to the river and then
makes sense.
Stay in position in a spot that he has probably not prepared himself for, basically.
Sure. Makes sense. I was rather unhappy to see him call. But yeah, I agree with you. In fact, like, it's weird because like I would, if I had I don't know how often I mean, I probably would 3-bet this a bunch. Like my really good hands, like 6-7, I think I would probably 3-bet. Especially if it was like 6-7 of hearts. But like, I was concerned that on the river, my hand I would just look like super face up. Like I've got the absolute stones if I call his check raise and then he bets small and I raise, or he checks and I bomb or something. But I was concerned that he would like think, when I do have a value hand, he's going to always fold. So then I was trying, I don't know why I didn't just exploit it to be like, I'll just call and then I'll just bang in the river because he's never going to call. Yeah. But in my head, I was like, I really want to, in my mind, have this properly where I'm going to have, if I'm going to 3-bet this turn, which is like super megaphone, here I've got a straight, do you want to put any more money in? I also want to do that, even though it would make more sense and probably get through more often if I just banged it in on the river and called the turn. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I mean, it should do, but...
Yeah.
But I think people in explosively are going to fold the other line more than this line.
Well, anyway. And we also get to like make sure that we get to make the play on the best rivers, right? Because now there's a lot of rivers. I mean, this river would have been fine.
Yeah, sure.
Normal size.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, does check.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think basically no matter what you do, like I don't, and this kind of like shows why turn 3-bets maybe not ideal, is like now you're going to shove the river.
Yeah.
But you kind of have like, I know he's not really doing this with say like ace-7 of clubs or maybe 8-7 of clubs, but like those are hands that could be in his range. So just like he decides he's going to check call, then he sees your small bet and he tries to attack those things. So we don't have a great blocker with respect to value because he's never going to slow play, 6-7, right? When you bet small on the flop, nobody has the discipline in these games to have like the check call with the 6-7 here, right?
Sure.
So our hand blocks no value, blocks call folds. We also like still have showdown in this line because he can have check raise bluffs that now just call. Like say he decides to check raise the turn with any of his ace-6 of clubs or king-10 of clubs or whatever. We have hit showdown against those hands, which is part of the reason I don't necessarily love bluffing the turn with this hand. So, and then like everything's missed, pretty big brick. If he has a hand that check raises the turn for value that sees this river that's going to fold, it's like kind of not that many hands, like pocket 10s, pocket jacks. I don't really expect people to fold like kings and aces in this line. So I think if we just called turn, we could play the river. We could maybe shove over the river bet sometimes, but at least we get to play in position with equity.
Yeah.
Whereas now we've kind of narrowed his range and there's not really that much to be gained from bluffing this hand again on the river, I don't think, on this river. So I think I think the punt was probably the turn 3-bet. And if we just played the river in position, then we could have, on this river, maybe we just fold to a bet, because if he bets this river, it's like, such a brick. And but we could have sometimes, bluffed on clubs. We could have sometimes bluffed on other river, like, an ace or deuce, or there's all these other rivers that are going to be really annoying for him. But now we've kind of put ourselves in a sticky spot where I'm assuming this hand's in here that we decided to put the rest of the biscuits in the middle too.
There we go.
And I think punted. Overall, this is just, I think the turn is the punt, basically. Like, once you get to the river, I kind of understand what you're doing. Like, there's not much point in 3-betting the turn if you're not going to jam this river.
Yeah.
But I think the turn is the punt. So we're going to have to give this one a punt.
That is very reasonable. But do we get it through?
We'll see.
Full time bank again. But he does get it through this time. Not sure what that was, but hopefully it was a set. That would be hilarious. But I don't see what it could possibly be as a set. Like, he's not folding pocket nines, and I think he check raises all his other sets on the flop. So I have no idea.
Bet that he never folds a set here, so it's got to be like
aces
again. Probably one of those, like aces or kings, or some. Yeah,
makes sense.
It's obviously this is how it works. The punt you lost. The punt you won, and the no punt you lost. And that's usually how it works, right?
Exactly. Well, I'll take the money because I'm desperate need of it at the moment. I'm doing stupid stuff like this all the time, so obviously I'm not winning.
Well, that's the good thing is we got a tie going to the last hand. So, and supposedly it's a spicy one. So let's take a look at that one now.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So on to the last hand, I see Nick has accumulated 300 big blinds on this table.
It's a rare occurrence, Ryan.
We some of the other non-punts got through, and I'm hoping for the sake of the viewers that Segaman joins us in this pot.
I mean, what we do get instead is Mr. Love 0954, who is playing 60-40-20.
Well, and he's got 200 big blinds, so things can still get dicey.
Anyway, we have up to you.
3-bet?
3-bet?
Yep.
Make it 7, and it folds to Love, who calls.
Seems good. So far, so good.
8-4 deuce, 2 spades, Love checks.
And how are you approaching this spot?
2/3 check, or like I get a bit confused. I think out of position this is 2/3 check, and then this is probably half pot check in position, but it's bigger bet check is my strategy, and this I'm pretty much always going to bet this because of how often it needs, how much protection it needs.
And you said this guy's playing like super wide, right?
60-40-20, yeah. He's like 100 hands, but like, he's shaping up to be pretty special.
So against him, like even more value to be had. Could even size up. The only thing is, like, whenever you're considering sizing up, you want to think of the effect you're creating. It's like, it's not like even against his range, we're going to want to play a 400 big blind pot on a lot of runouts. We can't even turn like we only have one out to the nuts.
Yeah.
So I think like sticking to a pretty reasonable like half pot strategy here makes sense.
Okay, I go to 2/3.
It's fine. Yeah, like we're a bit deeper. Like also like using some bigger bets and then checking river against this player type is definitely fine. So.
And he calls.
Also good. I mean, so far so good.
Turn is a 10.
And I'm okay with a little bit of a. So you're not supposed to bet this hand in theory for sure. We have so many other better hands to bet. We have we need some hands that can check and like bluff catch the river. I think it's fine to use this hand in either line, to be honest. The more you've seen from your opponent, like if he's kind of just like crazy on turns and say he just check raises you a ton, then obviously this hand is not good to bet because you're going to get bluffed off your hand a lot. Whereas you can bluff catch at least reasonably well on some rivers. But if he's the like call, get to the river, hope I make the best hand type player, then obviously we could like kind of split a range here and bet like a bit of a more middling size on this turn with some hands, and then even play some like pots or overbets at this depth. Because this turn is such a brick that if we have like aces or kings or queens or, even ace 10 of spades or whatever, just any of those really good hands that like playing some big pots, we could have a big size. So you could split here, I think, against this player type and have like a middling size and a really big size.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I decided to check.
Okay. Yeah, again, I said this hand goes either way. So now how did things get crazy spicy in this spot?
7 of clubs. And love checks. And I was just thinking like whether I wanted to... whenever something checks in the river, I always think, is my hand worth 2/3 pot? If not, check. If it is, then I bet 2/3 pot. And I was pretty sure that this was worth 2/3 pot at the time.
Do you not use half pot here ever?
No, I only use 2/3 pot if I bet the river.
Okay.
In position.
So it's good in position to have a threshold. I typically use half pot as my threshold for the position, because especially in broken lines, because in this spot, your opponent's not supposed to check. Like, I would definitely bet your hand for what it's worth, because your opponent's not really supposed to check call a hand that's better than ours. So if your opponent has a 10 or better, he should bet himself. He should block. He should, overbet, whatever. Whatever hands can beat pocket nines.
Yeah.
For the most part, they're supposed to bet themselves. And then anything that checks the river that's better than pocket nines should mainly be check raising. They should have a little bit of their weakest 10x in there, sure. But say most of their range that beats us that checks the river is going for the check raise. So when we bet this hand, we block both check raise bluffs and check raises for value. He's not really going to have a ton of straights that contain a 9 in theory, but this player type can literally just have 6-9 of clubs that gets to the river or whatever, right?
Yeah, sure.
Jack 9 of hearts. So it doesn't really matter. Obviously, we block the Jack 9 hearts, but just he could just have any 2 cards. He could have any straight. So actually having 9s against him is good in that sense, especially because of everything we just said. He's mainly supposed to bet a hand that beats ours. If you want to go for 2/3 with this hand, that's fine. But in these broken lines, I'll usually split a bit more and do a lot of half potting and then some bigger bets. So I'm cool with betting this hand for sure, because I think it's, against this player's range is worth value.
Yeah, I agree. I went for 2/3. I think I just couldn't see him folding an 8. And I like having the 9 of diamonds, because then he can have 9/8 suited more often than if I had 9 of hearts, 9 of clubs, for example. So I just figured, I'm just going to bet 2/3. It felt kind of thin, but I'm just going to bet 2/3 pot. Now this is the interesting part, because Love enters, he full-time banks to the point of the guy with the 9/7 of clubs that called off earlier. I've never seen anybody full-time bank to literally the last second and then raise.
This is not ideal, but again, this is how we expected this spot. We said if he has a better hand, this is what's supposed to happen, right? If he's saying he has a better hand, he's not really supposed to check call that hand.
Yeah.
So now he's saying he has either trapped you earlier, has 5-6, or his pocket 7s that decide to go for a check raise. It's an interesting spot, because on this run out, so say the run out was slightly different. Say the turn was a 7. You might bet your hand if the turn was a 7, but we'll just talk through an example. But so say the turn was a 7, and then the river was like a king or a queen or an ace, right? Then check raising becomes a lot more appealing, because we're going to bluff those cards and we're going to improve on those cards a lot. So we're going to go bet, check, bet a lot on those rivers. This river is interesting because when we check turn, if you think of our turn checking range, this is a really good turn for our range as a whole, because it never improves him. All of our overpairs are still the nuts. And we have tons of potential bluffs to go with it. So a lot of our strong hands bet the turn. So we don't actually have a ton of hands that want to go bet, check, bet here, right? We don't improve on the 7. Again, I don't know how much this guy's thinking about it, but it's a good thing for you to think through. I'd be kind of weirded out when I get check raised here, because he shouldn't expect us to bet this river very often. So if he had a really good hand, overbet makes a lot of sense for his range, because we're going to have more bluff catchers than we are hands that want to bet call. We're obviously going to have potential bluffs as well that, we can just have king, queen of hearts, and against that portion of our range, his check raises obviously make money against, they want, because they would fold versus a bet, but we can bluff if he checks. But it's just worth thinking about in this spot that he shouldn't expect us to reopen the betting that much on the river. So it's kind of just interesting when he checks this river and goes for the check raise on this specific run out.
After a full-time bank.
Yeah, exactly. That's and now we don't know, was he trying to decide if he wanted to go all in? Was he trying to decide if he wanted to bluff or call? There's a lot of things he'd be thinking about, right? He could also just be watching something on Netflix. Who knows?
That is true as well. I just thought that somebody, first of all, I think that they generally, if they had a straight or a set, they would bet the river themselves. And then I just thought that if they had those hands, usually, especially against fish, I just get raised so much quicker. I mean, there are some regs that take a little bit of time and then raise, but I don't think this person's going to be thinking about their sizing for that long. If they had a good hand, I think it would be quite quick that I would see it. So I threw out fold, and then I was deciding between call and shove. And I like shove, but I also hate shove because it's a 60, 40, 20 and they're just not going to fold a set. Like the amount of times I've tried to get people to fold things and they're just cool with like the 15th, 16th nuts. I'm just like, okay. So yeah. I don't know, man. What do you think?
I strongly prefer call here because I think if he has a better, like, I don't think this opponent's ever check raising thin here. So, I mean, it just wouldn't make sense in general. He's not going to check raise ace 10. So like the bottom of his check raise range that beats us is like 2 pair.
Yeah.
And there's an old adage that you don't try and get recreational players to fold 2 pair full houses. Like no matter what the strength of that hand is, if they have a hand that's good, don't try and get them to fold that. So I think like, even though I'm not trying to get him to fold good hands, but I think our blockers are relevant enough where he can just have like, especially the guy playing this wide, can just have like 4-5, pocket 3, pocket 5s, like so many random hands that just decide they can't check call, but they feel like bluffing. And I think I would much rather use this hand as a hero call than trying to get my opponent to fold anything better than, two pair or better. Basically, I'm not going to try and get a 60-40 guy to fold 2 pair or better once he's put in, over almost half his stack.
I agree. I wanted to do it because I was like, but at the same time, you're right. I don't think you should. So are you saying that you would play this hand the same if I do call?
If you called the river, I'm 100% on board.
All right, I do call. So no punt.
No, definitely no punt. I don't even. Okay. You don't have to, when he shows us the 5-6, I don't even care.
Okay, is there anything that he could show you that you would feel bad about?
If he shows me ace 10, my reads go out the window.
Okay, well, we just got completely bid.
My God. Wow, this guy. It's hilarious because if he's gonna check a 10, this is like one of the best ones to check, and then he just completely owns you with the ace 10.
I feel so eviscerated. It's so unfair. I could just have pocket jacks here. It's just, and I just don't. I want pocket 9s. I was on the stream and I was like, oh my God, I might have to turn off the stream. I've just been absolutely wrecked by a recreational. Maybe I'm the recreational.
Worst part is you thought about shoving.
I know. That would have worked.
There's no point in shoving. Like, he doesn't have folds, and this is the hand that would have folded.
Imagine if I shove and he calls. Oh my God.
Well, I'm a big fan of his play for what it's worth.
Oh, yeah.
When you have pocket 9s.
Exactly. Jesus. What a horrible feeling.
I mean, this is how it always works out, right? Both the hands we didn't punt on, we lost money. The hand we punted on, we won money. So I guess everyone just needs to... What you take from this is just punt more often. And
exactly. Silver linings. At least we've got something to take away. At least I won. And also, at least you would have got the same owned as I did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's good to see that you can you win at your own game, basically, and obviously
easy game.
These were just as crazy as the last ones Nick put up. The ones we put up on his channel were a lot of fun. So we'll end it here, but Nick, if you have anything you want to say before we sign off.
No, just thanks a lot for doing this with me, Ryan. I really appreciate it. Obviously, super thankful to have your insight on, even though these are splashy hands, like just hearing you talk about my hands is just, it's really cool for me. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and obviously for doing Punt on Open on my channel as well. I think part 2 will be out at the same time as this is kind of out. And yeah, just in case anyone thought that I was bringing on hands to win, I wasn't convinced I was going to win this. I thought I had a chance, but I wasn't convinced I would win this. I definitely lost the one that didn't get through. So that one was maybe even worse. So yeah, just thanks a lot for doing this with me, man. I look forward to maybe doing something else with you in the future.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, and if you guys enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe. And as we mentioned, you'll find all of Nick's stuff below. All right, guys, take care.
Thanks.